On June 4, 1942, one of the most dramatic battles of World War II, the Battle of Midway Atoll, took place in the sky over the Pacific Ocean. On this fateful day, American bomber pilot Lieutenant Commander Richard Halsey best performed an unprecedented feat that will forever go down in the history of military aviation. In one day, he personally sank two Japanese aircraft carriers, the Akagi and the Hiru, becoming the only pilot in history who managed to destroy two enemy aircraft carriers in a single battle. His precise bombing attacks helped turn the tide of the Pacific War and stop the advance of the Japanese Empire. But Best had to pay a high price for this triumph. Inhaling poisonous fumes during combat actually ended his brilliant military career. Richard Halsey Best was born on March 24, 1910, in Bayonne, New Jersey, into a family of modest means. Since childhood, the boy dreamed of the sky and military service, admiring the exploits of American pilots of the First World War. After graduating from high school in 1928, Best entered the prestigious United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, where he proved himself to be a capable and disciplined cadet. In 1932, he graduated with honors from the Academy and received the rank of Ensign Second Lieutenant. Best initially served aboard the USS Richmond, where he studied the basics of naval service and command. However, the dream of flying did not leave the young officer, and in 1934, he submitted a transfer report to the Fleet Air Arm. After successfully passing the medical board and initial tests, Best was sent to flight training at Pensacola Air Force Base in Florida, the main training center for U.S. naval pilots. The training was grueling and dangerous. Many cadets could not cope with the loads or died in accidents. But Best showed outstanding piloting abilities, especially in dive bombing, the most difficult and dangerous type of air attack. In 1938, Lieutenant Best was assigned to the VB-6 Squadron bombing Squadron 6, based on the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, one of the most modern and powerful ships of the American Navy. He flew the Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber, an aircraft that would become the main strike force of American carrier-based aircraft in the Pacific War. In the following years, Best honed his skills by participating in numerous exercises and training flights. On Sunday morning, December 7, 1941, Lieutenant Best was aboard Enterprise when Japanese aircraft launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The aircraft carrier was returning from a mission at the time and escaped destruction, but many of Best's colleagues lost friends who died in the attack. This day changed everything. America entered World War II, and the naval pilots faced the task of stopping Japan's rapid advance in the Pacific Ocean. In the early months of the war, Best participated in several raids on Japanese positions, including attacks on the Marshall Islands, Marcus and Wake. During the raid on Kwajalein Atoll in February 1942, he demonstrated outstanding bombing accuracy by sinking a Japanese transport. In April 1942, Best participated in the famous Doolittle raid on Tokyo as a cover pilot from the aircraft carrier Enterprise. By May 1942, Lieutenant Commander Best was appointed commander of VB-6 Squadron, becoming one of the most experienced and respected bomber pilots in the fleet. He had about 24 planes and crews under his command. In early June 1942, American intelligence deciphered Japanese codes and learned of an impending large-scale attack on Midway Atoll, a strategically important point in the center of the Pacific Ocean. 3 American aircraft carriers, including Enterprise, ambushed the Japanese fleet, which outnumbered and outgunned them. On the morning of the 4th of June, 1942, a Japanese strike force of 4 aircraft carriers was discovered. Best took his squadron into the air around 7 in the morning. The flight to the target took almost 2 hours, a long and stressful journey over the endless waters of the ocean, where the slightest mistake in navigation could mean death from lack of fuel. When the American bombers finally spotted the Japanese fleet, confusion ensued. The squadrons lost contact with each other. The torpedo bombers attacked first and were almost completely destroyed by Japanese fighters. But their sacrifice was not in vain. They pulled the enemy fighters to the surface of the sea. The destruction of the Akagi. At about 10 in the morning, Best's squadron reached the target. A picture of the Japanese fleet in full force unfolded before them. Best made an instant decision to attack the flagship aircraft carrier Akagi, the pride of the Imperial Navy, which participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor. Deploying his SBD Dauntless, Best went into a steep dive at an angle of about 70 degrees. Japanese anti-aircraft gunners opened fierce fire. The sky was filled with exploding shells and tracer bullets. The overloads were monstrous, but Best coolly steered his plane to the target, aiming at the center of the flight deck, where the planes were ready for takeoff, fueled and armed. At an altitude of about 500 meters, Best dropped his 1,000-pound bomb and abruptly brought the plane out of a dive. The bomb hit its target, piercing the flight deck next to the central elevator. The explosion detonated torpedoes and bombs on the hangar deck, setting off a chain reaction of devastating explosions. The Akagi was engulfed in uncontrollable flames. By evening, the flagship of the Japanese fleet sank. Second attack, the death of the Hiru. After returning to Enterprise and refueling at about 15:30, Best learned that intelligence had discovered the fourth Japanese aircraft carrier, the Hiru, which had escaped the morning attack and managed to strike back, severely damaging the American aircraft carrier Yorktown. Despite being physically and mentally exhausted after the morning battle, Best took to the air again at the head of his squadron. The second attack of the day began around 17 o'clock. The Hiru was desperately maneuvering, trying to evade the attack, and its anti-aircraft guns were creating a dense curtain of fire. But Best again demonstrated outstanding skill. Entering a dive, he accurately calculated the preemption and dropped the bomb, which hit the front of the flight deck. However, it was during this dive that the fatal incident occurred. The oxygen system of Best's aircraft malfunctioned, and he inhaled a large amount of caustic soda fumes from the breathing apparatus. Despite a sharp pain in his chest and difficulty breathing, Best managed to bring the plane out of a dive and return to the aircraft carrier. The Hiru, engulfed in flames after being hit by several bombs, sank the next day. Tragic consequences of the feat. Upon returning to Enterprise, Best immediately sensed that something was wrong. The pain in his chest was getting worse, and his breathing became heavy. The ship's doctor diagnosed severe lung damage. Inhalation of caustic soda vapor caused chemical burns to the respiratory tract and acute tuberculosis. Despite his desire to continue fighting, Best was declared unfit to fly. In September 1942, just 3 months after his greatest triumph, the 32-year-old pilot was hospitalized and effectively ended his combat career. He spent the next 2 years in military hospitals fighting tuberculosis, which was a deadly disease in that era. Post-war life. In 1944, Best was decommissioned, and he took an administrative position in the U.S. Navy. After the end of the war in 1945, he retired with the rank of lieutenant commander, without receiving the high awards that his feat deserved. For many years, Best's contribution to the victory of Midway remained underestimated by the general public. Best settled in Santa Monica, California, where he worked for Douglas Aircraft Corporation, the same company that produced his SBD Dauntless bomber. He was a modest man and rarely talked about his military exploits. He got married, raised children, and led the quiet, measured life of an ordinary American. Recognition and memory. It was only in the 1990s, when historians began to study the Battle of Midway in detail, that Richard Best's feat received well-deserved recognition. It turned out that he remains the only pilot in world history who sank 2 enemy aircraft carriers in one day. His actions on June 4, 1942, played a decisive role in turning the tide of the Pacific War. In 2000, the elderly Best was invited to the premiere of the film Pearl Harbor, where he was the guest of honor. In the last years of his life, he gave interviews to historians, helping to restore the true picture of the events at Midway. Richard Halsey Best died on October 28, 2001, at the age of 91. He was buried with military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. In 2000, his feat was shown in the Hollywood blockbuster Midway, directed by Roland Emmerich, where the role of Best was played by actor Ed Skrein. Friends, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like it.